So good morning, everybody. Welcome to The Powerful Patient and welcome, Marta. So this is Marta Schultz. She's the new executive director, the first executive director ever of the International Kidney Cancer Coalition. And Robin and Mike and I have been members of the IKCC for some time. I was on their board for 5 years or so. And we're delighted to have you. So,
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your background.
I have a very mixed background, I think. I started, I think, my career long time ago. It's a little bit scary to calculate all the years, but it was, I don't want to say 30, but I think 30 years ago, which is, it's very weird, but I was young. And I started with working with a patient organization. Back then it was multiple sclerosis, a national organization in Poland, where I'm from. And yeah, I kind of engaged a lot in their work. Originally as a volunteer, I was running then a youth section, and then I assisted in a number of international meetings. And it led me to switch to a PR agency that kind of saw me, what I was doing, representing the Polish MS Association, and they kind of stole me. And this is how I developed a second part of my career in healthcare communications. And then I again went back to NGOs. I couldn't leave that field, and I've joined Europa Colon, which is a pan-European colorectal cancer organization. And I was responsible for affiliates. I was managing the affiliates. And then I don't remember. Oh yeah, I know why. Thanks to you guys in US, the 2008 financial crisis happened. Thank you, thank you. And unfortunately, this impacted heavily the organization I was working for, and they had a lot of cuts because, yeah, the sponsors have canceled on the sponsorship, and I was pregnant with my second child back then, and well, I had to find something else to do because they couldn't no longer have that many staff.
Right.
So I ended up with it in the corporate world, and I've stayed with corporate world for 10 years, but I was responsible for social impact. So I think I've never left really the social part of my soul. And until I moved to the Netherlands, and 4 years later, I decided to leave the corporate world again.
Yes.
And to join this time an international, a global patient organization. So I think it's on one hand, I feel that I have a very weird background. And on the other hand, I think it's somewhat led me to this position, because in the corporate world, I spent my 4 years in Amsterdam were also in a global position, coordinating a global program, educational program. So I think it was somehow taking steps in the same direction, weirdly enough.
Yes, I think you're right. And it sounds like your talents are coming together in just the right way for the IKCC.
I hope so.
Because I think with all of us NGOs, non-governmental organizations or nonprofits, one of the first things that I feel we needed to do is to create community, because so many people with any rare disease feel so alone, or
Yeah.
even with a cancer diagnosis, you feel like you're the only one in the world who's going through this. You've never met this kind of terminology before. You don't know any of these specialists. It's all, you're just out there in the woods by yourself. And so creating community is that first step. And for the people who work in those nonprofits, I know when I started with the VHL organization, I had never done this, but I needed to do it for my son. And so I was desperately looking for a peer group, for somebody to guide me. How do I do this? What do I do? And so that, just bringing together that international community of leaders of these support organizations is so critically important. So thank you.
And I absolutely agree with what you are saying. And this is actually one of my priorities. And as IKCC and seeing where the IKCC is going, one of my priorities is to really have a close connection to affiliate organizations and to be in touch with them, because basically that's the biggest asset that we have. And without it, there is no need for IKCC almost to exist. So yeah, community.
Marta, you've been interviewed by Casey Cure, and I've picked up a post or two that's on their website about your conversation with Dana Battle.
Yeah.
And I love the reason you became involved in advocacy, the way you stated on that. You state that the conviction is that the world can be changed for the better. We can do it only if we're doing it together.
Yeah.
And then you went on to add, we're rethinking all these things lately on the global responsibility. And no matter what condition you're diagnosed with as an individual, you don't have to have the biggest, the most popular, or the most common malady to matter and to make a difference. And can you add to that a little bit more, what you're bringing to the Kidney Cancer Alliance?
Yeah, that's
that?
that's definitely my very strong conviction. I continuously find myself being an idealist, and it sometimes makes me look like a fool, to still believe that people are good and that we can make a change, but I refuse to stop believing in that. And I think that the moment I would stop believing that the world can be changed for better and that we can do it together, I think that's time for me to go. I don't know where, but that would be definitely a pivotal moment in my life. And yeah, I'm naive in that sense, that I prefer to be let down by people and still maintain this belief that we can make a change and we can make this together, rather than stop believing. And when it comes to cancer, I find it sometimes, I don't know how to put it, weird that there is this kind of competition, which cancer is the most popular one, which cancer has the biggest precedence, or which cancer is the most deadly. And I don't think that there should, I mean, I understand where it's coming from, but in the end, there is a person behind every diagnosis, and every person has the right to matter, to be taken seriously. And it shouldn't be a matter of how popular the cancer is, but it's simply the person that is behind it matters. And I think that from what I've heard already from many patients with cancer is that they are people with the cancer diagnosis. And that's what is the most important part, rather than patients and the diagnosis is the first and the foremost most important thing. I think we are humans, and I actually would love to live in the world where whatever topic we are discussing and whatever we are doing, there is always, we see a human at first and foremost, rather than a title or a diagnosis or an organization or, you name it. I would like to see more humanity in the world, I think, and that's what makes me very naive, I guess. But maybe that's good. Maybe we need naive people, I hope.
A little touch of naivete is a good thing, that's for sure. Yeah. And I don't know if you've met Robin before, but Robin is the lead moderator for an international support group called smartpatients.com. And she's spoken at a number of IKCC conferences. Robin?
Marta, it's nice to meet you. It's a good organization to be working for. So we're really glad to have you with IKCC.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us what your goals and aspirations are for the IKCC. Where would you like to lead it now that you're initiating this new phase of IKCC?
I definitely would like to, as I said, strengthen the relationship with affiliates. And I've started with having one-on-one meetings with a number of affiliates from different countries. And it became clear that building the connection and enable them to share experiences, best practices, to exchange information is absolutely vital and critical. And I think that actually this is the silver lining of COVID, that we have learned that collaboration is needed and it's possible. So I think that I have to admit, I hate Zoom. I think I'm becoming a Zombie. This is the new word that I've learned. But on the other hand, I like the fact that I've talked today to India, to Australia, to a few other countries, to US as well, you guys, and Canada on top of it, because that's, I think, my 4th call today. So on the other hand, there is something incredibly interesting that we can connect to each other so quickly. I just still want to emphasize the importance of a real face-to-face connection. And I don't want to miss that part. I think that it's great that we have Zoom and all the fancy digital tools. I'm happy to use them, but I would also like to build a deeper connection between the organizations, and in particular between the IKCC headquarters, so to speak, and the local organization. So to facilitate all types of connections. And again, for the greater good, because everything that I've heard so far tells me that by exchanging the experiences and sharing stories and being together, as you said, sometimes people leading an organization, or maybe quite often, they're also lonely and being overwhelmed with the responsibility that they bear on their shoulders and the need to support others. And sometimes it's so easy to forget to take care of yourself. So I wanted to take care of them as well. And yeah, and to help everyone. In the end, I think patients will benefit from that. But that's definitely one of the priorities. And on a bigger picture, of course, I want to use whatever the IKCC has built so far, a lot of significant initiatives. And I think IKCC is really excelling in providing a very evidence-based information, and that's definitely wonderful. So I would like to empower this and use this type of approach even further and to build on that. And I see a lot of opportunities. So I think the biggest challenge is to build a long-term strategy. And I'm currently also working on having a very clear vision and mission, so that we are clear on and well-defined impact on what IKCC can make in the world, so that we all know how to make choices when it comes to this ocean of opportunities. And yeah, so in a nutshell, I think it's that.
That's great. Just for the benefit of the people who are listening in who are not yet familiar with IKCC, give us a few statistics about how many support organizations in how many countries, how many continents that you bring together, and the network that you're creating.
Yeah, I think that I may have a little bit of a trouble to be very precise in numbers. I did memorize that we have 46 affiliates all over the globe. I think on all continents, on the top of my head. And but I don't remember how many countries.
Okay.
47.
Less than 46, this I can tell you, because some affiliates are from the same country, but I don't remember how many. I need to memorize that number. But overall, we are representing 1.5 million patients worldwide with kidney cancer. And among our affiliates are organizations that are focusing on all cancer, representing all cancers, or in some cases, they are kidney cancer specific organizations, or in some cases, they are kidney organizations also covering the scope of cancer. So it's a very diverse group, I have to say. And the cultural and language diversity is also like on top of it.
Yeah.
They are very different when it comes to size, the team behind. So it's quite fascinating to learn how they operate. But they are all lovely people. They have this one thing in common. They are a group of absolutely lovely, passionate people, really dedicating their hearts and lives to help patients, whether with all cancers or with just kidney cancer. But it's definitely really inspiring.
That's great. So IKCC has been around for more than 10 years now, and before the pandemic, you had an annual meeting where we brought together the heads of support organizations for kidney cancer from all over the world, and usually would have between 50 and 100 people in a room, as you say, with a whole bunch of different languages. The meeting was in English, or as Deborah always used to say, the standard language for this meeting is bad English.
Yes, that would be quite correct. Especially for me, I'm not a native English speaker. I'm Polish, so I always pull out this card. I'm allowed to make mistakes.
Right. And well, as a speaker, it was always interesting because you knew that for the majority of people in the audience, English was not their first language. So
Yeah.
you had to make sure you didn't speak in slang or speak too rapidly.
Oh, yeah.
You know, to try to give them a chance to process it mentally into their own native language. And we had a couple of people who would bring a translator, but who felt that the experience was so valuable that they needed to be there, even though they didn't speak English, and they got it sort of secondhand, but the whole atmosphere was just so nourishing. It was really
Yeah.
beautiful.
And this year we are also going to have a global affiliate meetings, and again online, which is to my disappointment. But I have seen such a rapid development of different digital tools offering different solutions, how to, let's say, recreate the feeling and the serendipity that happens during the offline meeting, that most likely we are going to experiment with at least some of those tools, because I really want to dedicate this year's meeting to facilitate the connection. And again, whether it's the connection between IKCC and affiliates or affiliates between themselves, it's quite important to create this opportunity for people to exchange experiences, being able to talk to one another. And as I said, yes, luckily, there is a real, I think, even too fast development of the tools. And sometimes it's very difficult to catch up in terms of what's out there. But I think on the other hand, that's encouraging. And it's, you know, it is what it is. There is a saying, if you don't have what you like what you have. And I think that's what we are trying to make the best out of it. We don't have any other choice. But I'm still trying to find a way to have a good, deep conversation, even though the circumstances are maybe not the best. But on the other hand, I'm at your homes and you are in my bedroom. So,
That's right.
so we are, you know, usually you wouldn't probably be invited to my bedroom.
That's right. Well, I think many of us have a kind of love-hate relationship in different proportions with Zoom, because on the one hand, it's not as good as being together, of course,
Yeah.
but it is certainly a great deal better than just an email conversation or even just a telephone call. The fact that you
Yeah.
can see the other person, you get a little body language into the mix.
A little.
Yeah. Okay. And that can help a lot. I think it makes it more friendly. So teaching people to use these tools is
Yeah.
not only good for you as a central entity distributing information, but it also teaches people how they can talk to each other when they're not in those big meetings. Just having a one-on-one Zoom call is sometimes very, very helpful, especially I think across different languages.
Yeah, I'm happy that you have realized this challenge regarding the different languages, because I think sometimes for native English speakers, they just sometimes forget that there is always this extra layer and extra effort that people have to make to be able to either express themselves clearly or to simply to understand what is being said. And that's why I think the participation in a discussion, it's so important to facilitate it in different ways, so that is also not overwhelming. So to create smaller groups where people are not intimidated by big, foreign, and actually the digital tools can help in that, because then you can, make breakout rooms very, very quickly, even with 3 people in it. And that can really, strengthen the connection without this need that, you are embarrassed because you have to use another language in a large forum, in a plenary session. This is a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, even for the people who are fluent in English. But if they are not, then it's very difficult to participate. So I'm also trying to, similarly to our discussion about cancer, it's not about who speaks the best English. Every person matters, and every person has the right to participate and to express themselves. It just comes with a lot of challenges when we are using English, and we haven't found yet any other solution to that. So it is what it is. But I think there are ways where we can help each other to, have smaller groups, discuss some things in breakout rooms so that people can still participate and they do not have to feel, embarrassed or intimidated by the big plenary session.
IKCC has grown so much over the years in both number of affiliates and scope of projects. And one of the things that IKCC has done is a worldwide survey every couple of years of kidney cancer patients and family members who are giving the care, to ask about their concerns. And another major project is World Kidney Cancer Day.
Yeah.
Marta, could you tell us a little about those?
Yeah, this survey that indeed is biannual has been discussed today, among many other things. The findings of it, I should say, because the survey has happened last year at the end of the year. So now we are discussing the findings and also discussing what is really the biggest finding. And because there is again, this time ocean of information, it's very difficult to determine what exactly is the biggest one. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to throw at people a 70 pages report and just tell them to read it. But indeed, it's really providing us a lot of information. And what is most fascinating is to observe and hear the differences between countries when we ask questions about the time spent to diagnosis. So the time between the first symptoms have occurred, something worrisome, and then before the diagnosis was given. It's very interesting to see the similarities and also differences between different countries. And we already had a number of discussions that sometimes it's also culturally sensitive, the way we are giving back our perspective. So in some cultures, to bring complaints and to be unhappy about something is more common, and in some countries in some cultures you are more in agreement with what is happening. So it's sometimes when we ask about your experience, whether you understood or whether you were happy with the treatment, sometimes we have to take this into consideration, that it's not only about the facts, what is happening, but the way you feel. It also is strongly rooted in the culture that you are coming from. So these surveys are really a fascinating tool to see how shared experiences can also have small differences between countries. And I think it's a great invitation to have a deep dive into the kidney cancer world overall. But it's difficult to give you like 5 most important findings because they are exactly now being discussed. And then as to the World Kidney Cancer Day, that is happening in June, this year topic is feelings and emotions. So we have to talk about how do we feel, and the well-being and the psychosocial status is definitely, I think, no surprise, something incredibly important, particularly in the times of pandemic. And I think that it's on one hand, I would say bad that, this is such a huge mental burden of the pandemic that the pandemic brought upon all of us, absolutely, whether we are patients or not. But I think this year's topic of World Kidney Cancer Day is emphasizing this, that for cancer patients, for kidney cancer patients, it's even more difficult because they have their own, you may say, personal pandemic coming with every diagnosis. So what everyone now is experiencing as a time of uncertainty, as a time of increased pressure for cancer patients, this is something that they experience always this uncertainty, what the uncertainty associated with the treatment, with the diagnosis, with the reoccurrence of cancer. So I think it's so important to talk about this and to acknowledge this, that this is how cancer patients and kidney cancer patients in particular are feeling, and we can support them as patient organizations, as family members, as friends, but as long as we just stop pretending that it's not existing, because it is there. And also the survey has showed that very, very clearly. The emotional burden and the feeling of anxiety and depression and panic, it's definitely across all countries, which you may say, yeah, it's good that we share the experience. On the other hand, it's bad that we share this bad side of the experience, right? But I just think it just emphasizes the importance to talk about this, because then we could address this. And I think we can help this burden to be a little bit smaller.
Marta, you've got an excellent resource in the website there on ikcc.org. And one of the beautiful things that I noticed on it is it's available in several different languages. You've got a drop down there and it shows about 7 or 8 different languages that all the material is available in. And so if a person is not a kidney cancer survivor, but they're some other type of patient, they could learn a lot from going to the website and just looking at all the material and resources you have there, a breakdown of the kidney cancer incidences in all the countries that are representative. And I think you've got about 27 different countries listed that you're involved with. So thank you for all your work in putting this together for us.
Thank you. We have recently also discussed that the awareness that we are raising regarding the clinical trials was perceived as very useful from all kinds of organizations, not actually kidney cancer specific, because we are developing a lot of information that is simply explaining how the clinical trials are working. And it doesn't have to be with relation to kidney cancer. It's just a very general knowledge. But this level of general knowledge, I think, is absolutely needed and critical for patients to make a conscious decision whether someone want to participate in a clinical trial or not. And this was actually that I have heard from one of our affiliates, who is a pan-cancer organization, and who said that this type of information is very useful for them across all cancers. Because even though for the kidney cancer, the development of new treatments is absolutely vital, and therefore the clinical trials have such a large importance, it's still very important for other cancers as well. So I think but I'm also learning from other cancer organizations. So I think that, again, it proves the point that we can learn from one another. And I'm super happy when part of the IKCC work is being used by other organizations, and that it doesn't have to be kidney cancer specific. It just emphasizes that we provide a high quality of work, and it's very nice to hear that it can be used by others as well.
Right.
Yes, those of us with any medical condition have so much in common, and that's what brought us to put ourselves together as the Powerful Patient, because we work with people with a number of conditions. And as you know, my son has von Hippel-Lindau disease, so kidney cancer is one of a series of things that we have to worry about: brain tumors and eye tumors and pancreas tumors and so forth. So you learn that the strategies that you use for one condition actually have some applicability to many conditions.
Yes.
And as you say, we can learn from one another, even from other diseases.
Absolutely.
The good ideas and the good strategies for dealing with the mental stress that it is to have a condition where you're not real sure what's going to happen next year.
Yes.
And you learn to live with that in some way. So.
Yeah, it absolutely fascinates me that in COVID times, this uncertainty, I think, has been brought a number of times in media, whether there is a lockdown, whether it's going to be a second wave, third wave, how our lives are going to evolve, and people complaining about the fact that they have to spend few weeks at home. And I'm thinking, seriously, like, come on, there are people with different diagnoses who has exactly this all the time because they don't know what is going to happen next year. They don't know how the treatment is going to be. They are always a high-risk patients, and even a cold can be tragic for them. So seriously, I was thinking, why we don't talk enough about that? We pretend like the COVID experience is just a huge burden. I mean, I understand the global impact of it, but I think it's worth emphasizing that large part of population has this experience already, or even much worse. And still we don't talk about it enough, and we focus on treatment and access to treatment. And yeah, the well-being is absolutely critical.
So Mike is a long-term survivor with metastatic kidney cancer for, is it 24 years now, Mike?
24 years, yes. Had a checkup yesterday. We're doing good, so we're fine.
Yeah.
But you know, my oncologist looked at me and he said, Mike, he said, put yourself in my shoes. We've now got 6 first-line treatments approved in the US for kidney cancer. I get a new patient in that needs treatment. What am I going to prescribe? You know, and I mean, that's a dilemma that we've got that is a blessing, but it's also a challenge.
Absolutely.
But
And it's definitely something that we're not used to in kidney cancer. When
Yes.
you consider that in 2005, there was one treatment.
yes,
And now there are like 13 or 14 or more, and plus combinations that are approved as treatments.
Yeah. That's why at the IKCC we have updated actually the booklet My Treatment, which is about helping to make the decision together with the doctor, with the clinician, about the treatment. And it's actually a very I would say challenging discussion, not apart from all the complexity of the treatment, but also it's challenging because in many countries, it's probably not in US specifically, but in many countries, there is this image of a doctor who knows everything and can take all the decisions. And then patient role is really, to listen and follow what the patient is being said. And as you quite rightfully said, with the amount of treatments, we feel that the decision should no longer be only in the hands of the doctor. So the materials that we are developing are trying to explain to patients the pros and cons of certain treatments so that they can understand better together with the doctor, participate at least in a discussion, whether they want to try this or not. And I think that that's so important to, again, see that there is a person behind the treatment, and that I sometimes struggle with the fact that for the anonymity purposes, everything in clinical trials is the language that is being used is very impersonal, which I understand why, but then I sometimes feel that clinicians are forgetting that there is a person behind every case, that there is a person behind every treatment. And that for patients, sometimes the percentages of improvements or you know how it can prolong the length of life is sometimes less relevant in comparison to the quality of life, and how the quality of life looks like, and whether patients are still able to simply have a life, to meet the family, friends. And I think that that's the patient right to decide whether they want to be involved in that particular treatment, understanding what are the benefits and also understanding what are the side effects and what are the difficulties that one person has to go through when having this treatment. So I think it's a very interesting shift overall to give more voice and decision-making power to patients, and to again recognize them as partners in the conversation with the doctor, rather than someone who has to obey simply and have no voice at all.
Sounds perfect to me. So, and that's what we preach here at Powerful Patient all the time, that you need to know that you have a role also in your own care, and you need to be
Yes.
part of the discussion. You don't know more than the doctor. You need the doctor, but
Absolutely.
but the doctor also needs to be sensitive to the fact that you live with your body 24 hours a day, and
Yes.
you have a life that he may or may not relate to, and so you need to work together to find the right solution.
Yes. And that's, I think, also the doctors wouldn't be where they are if not for the patient. So it's just a mutual relationship that needs to work. And as it's exactly as you have said, Joyce, it's not about one person knowing more than the other. It's about we all have different perspectives, and
Yeah.
they're all valid and valuable, and they just need to be discussed. And then it should be a joint decision what to do next, and not imposed one. It shouldn't be a power play. It should be, again, like a collaboration,
Yes.
a relationship, rather than anything else.
Marta, this has been a delightful conversation, and we're
Thank
so
you.
glad that you are in your new role, and looking forward to working with you on World Kidney Cancer Day that's coming up in June. And it's going to last more than one day. So there'll be activities, I think, for the whole month of June. We certainly will have some on our website, and I know IKCC is working with its affiliates worldwide to get it out there, and ask people to take their own personal assessment of how they feel
Yes.
about life, the universe, and everything, especially in these days of COVID, and to really help them find new ways to cope with the uncertainties that are in everyone's life.
Yes. Thank you very much, Joyce. And thank you very much for having me and for inviting me to join this conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Marta.